Hello and welcome to day 52 of 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlins Nyback, and let's get right to it. We're here discussing issues of blackness in America. The foundation of these arguments and discussions is the economic aspect. We'll extract any moral leanings, any feelings, and things like that of that nature, and talk about the mighty dollar in America and how Black Americans are marginalized and uh, not quite allowed the access. Notice that word allowed. There are gatekeepers. There's marginalization. There are all these processes and institutions in place that keep blacks kind of in their place. We have our economics is a flat line where if you look at the economics of whites, Asians, Spanish, Asians, their economics is dynamic and always above that of blacks in general. So that's what we're getting at here. Part of my argument through these days is with two questions. First question has two parts. Does black slavery, the black mind, the black slave mind, vulnerability, of ignorance, things like that prevail through generation to generation? The second part of that question is, does the white idea of privilege, entitlement, power, domination prevail from generation to generation, coming from slavery? And so I have an answer to that, but I want to just present different ideas. It gets you to think on those issues. Second question is, are blacks playing the economic game in America properly? Or I look at some of the writings, I look at the ideology of other colors and races in America. Their idea of America is this is a place to start a business, create a business. And it's not much has changed from slavery. They still use black labor if they have to, unskilled, and they still find some ways to get a hold of land with apparently little to no effort. Free labor, free land. That's been the way of America since slavery got going. So those are the overarching burdens I bear coming here, day 52. We're informed by a man named Dr. Anderson, Dr. Claude Anderson. I've read 3 phenomenal books of his. He's got a couple others. He tours the country. He's got YouTube videos. Please check him out. See what he's got to say. Don't take it from me, But the first book I read was A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Second book of his I read was Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. We're going to be in there, that book again today. And also his national plan to empower Black America, Powernomics. The information, the plan here is more than a decade old, but all those ideas are still relevant because Black people in general have not come all that far. Our progress is very slow for a lot of reasons, which we're going to be teasing out through this whole year. And just so it's not blasé and reality and pressure and racism, essentially, we're going to that's the non-fictional look. We'll take a fictional look at Slavery in America, Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Every once in a while, we'll check in on old Tom and see how he's doing. our last episode, he has just found out he's been sold. He doesn't even hear the message. He gets it secondhand and all this. We follow Tom. We're going to see how he ends up there in Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work from the mid-1800s. Let's get right into it. We are going through a series today, and we're coming out of Black Labor, White Wealth, talking about impediments to empowerment and economic justice for Black folks here in America. And we're in a section of various obstacles, and it's broken down into a handful of myths that we're looking at. Yesterday's myth was integration. Today's myth is equal opportunity for all. They're two sides of the same coin. They go hand in hand. And you'll see how that works. Although I think equal opportunity, well, they go hand in hand. I feel like equal opportunity naturally follows in the myth of integration, right? The integration is the idea we can come and sit at the same table with white folks, eat in their restaurants, drink out of the fountains we want, all those things. What naturally follows is that now that we're here in this environment, interacting in this community with the integration, which is a myth, we want to think that we're participating equally now with what's going on in this scenario, with equal opportunity. And that's myth number 2 that we're going to be teasing out today. Because if we believe we're integrated and moving, I mean, I can sit on the same train in any seat I want. Here's a good example of the myths. But I'm the last person that white folks sit next to. Right? So is that integration just because I'm in the same box with white folks and I'm the last person people will sit with? Even on a crowded train, oftentimes the white folks will stand, even right there when I've got plenty of room right next to me, but they'll stand there instead. So is that integration? Is that the spirit of mingling in the culture? Right. So now, following that equal opportunity, does if the train had a sudden accident, do I have the same access to get out of that extreme situation as all the others, or am I just expected to be some type of expendable resource in that situation? That's our idea of the myth of equal opportunity. In my workplace, am I considered a viable candidate for promotion and things like this? And I say this interestingly, I'm being interviewed to possibly hold a better position in my workplace. I say this, but I will say most workplaces I've been in, I've either not had the skills because us Black folks just go to school, or we sit around a lot waiting for somebody else to tell us what to do, how to act. So some of the skilled labor that you'd see with a man that can wield a hammer, build a house. I'm not sure how it is for ladies, and things are changing as far as roles. between men and women now, but as I was coming up through the ranks, I'd be like, wow, how come every white guy knows how to get a hammer, run electricity, uh, make a wall from scratch, buy the right kind of lumber to do stuff, work on cars, all this stuff that black folks in general don't have. We're at the mercy of um, white power, privilege, and domination because we're not educating ourselves in that way. Um, so I started off, you look in the notes, I began the notes, we digressed from Dr. Anderson's process here in his book, and I put in my argument, which is that equal opportunity is a myth because of our own conditioning. Our conditioning um, is to wait to be told. Our conditioning is, how we come to life, to navigating uh, most likely dysfunctional situations. Now, granted, listen, everybody's going to have a good argument for a dysfunctional family. I don't know anybody who's 100% on board with saying their family was the best thing since sliced bread. But you put in economic pressures, education, early education, where you're sitting there in a class. There might be two or three other black folks in the classroom, but it's mostly white classroom, and the teacher is going through the curriculum, and I would say since first grade, second grade, I've always heard we go through the slave story in America. They always rehash and regurgitate and um, get that argument going all the time. And I remember feeling sometimes bad, for myself or funny. Hard to put a name to it being that young, but that kind of information is going to have two different perceptions. There's a black perception and a white perception. The white perception is going to be like, wow, I dodged that bullet. Yeah. And the black perception is like, man, you just uh, you just hobbled me mentally and emotionally. How do I um, navigate or process this information? It was never followed up with me at home, never followed up in the classroom. So that'd be something to look at if I ever got kind of in position to say, okay, that's the history that's happened, but let's talk about how it's being received, perceived. Uh, are these? How are these? What's the attitude of mind as these children go home after I tell one portion of the class they were slaves? I tell another portion of the class they were their ancestors, or they even could be slave owners and holders and practitioners of such a violation of human rights. How does that touch you? You know, you know, what do you say to children? Do you? Let's take even a break. Do you even teach children that? I'd say get them later in teenage years or something. Push that. You know, but in my mind, education is its own agenda, serving a whole different institution anyway. It's not education isn't for the sake of learning that it can be. It's a conditioning tool that lasts more than a decade uh, to really beat people down and lift others up. You know? So that's one myth of the equal opportunity is the education, how it's presented, and our conditioning in how we approach the world. Blacks are going to approach life much different than white folks. I live in this commuter city here, and I'm watching the holidays, and I've watched this for over a decade. How they can come and go, and they jump on planes and stuff. You know, um, they can pay for that. They can make that happen. They can build up things that they've not caused too much havoc in their lives. They get rights and privileges because they know how to handle money. That they have a financial language already going, and it's an ongoing conversation that blacks don't readily have, as far as I know. So that's a problem. Another problem of equal opportunity, and we'll get to now more Dr. Anderson's argument, is one thing is power is rarely shared. We saw with integration that um, the group being integrated doesn't share the same rights, privileges, and power of the group they integrate into. You're going to do it their way. You look at the countries, look at the language of countries, right? Especially around Africa. You can tell who conquered what European nation conquered those black folks by their national language. It's going to be French, Portuguese, English, Spanish, right? It's not, their native tongue prevails there in Africa, but for the most part, you're gonna hear a European tongue, which is indicative of the nation that came, colonized, and conquered that space. Okay, so the power is rarely shared. That's we're always waiting for white privilege with its hand out to give us access. Give us access. Give us this, that, and it's so it's improper uh, to have that. You know, we black folks, we need to get in front, and we need to start shaping our own policies here. And it's a long ways off. We got a lot of hurdles and stuff to go through, but I believe it's possible. So that's the problem. One problem is that power is not readily and easily shared from the dominant, powerful, entitled white community. Um, Whites, one issue that makes it so slow to bring about some economic change and benefits to black folks is that white folks don't believe there's a problem. They don't see it. You know, they see blacks working side by side. We can keep up in education. Uh, we're in sports, entertainment, all these sectors, journalism. Like we've got all the similar traits, tools, and can participate, but they still don't see how blacks can say that we need more help, we need some privileges to get a foothold. They see the whole thing as equitable, and that's just not the truth of the dynamic that's happening here in America. The black families is going to be tend to be generally more dysfunctional. The black environment is going to tend to be more dysfunctional and challenging. Uh, the blacks are bearing. They're a minority, and that minority is bearing the majority of America's social dysfunctions. So, majority of minority of this black population is incarcerated, hooked on drugs, unemployed, broken families, homes, and things like that. Although that's becoming normative and things like that. Uh, but the inability of black folks to kind of keep it together, so to speak, maintain some unity, come on, be on the same page with certain issues is the problem. You know, maybe not marriage per se, since that's becoming such a it's an institution that's losing its power here in America. Um, so that's one point. So it was the same with blacks. Blacks faced the same thing when they were emancipated or set free and this pseudo thing. But as far as the South or around the country, they were emancipated, but then drafted into a Jim Crow, semi-slavery America that still kept them marginalized and oppressed. But even after that, let's say all things being equal and Jim Crow and black codes did not exist, white folks would still be aggressive towards um, the power because they, white folks would be aggressive towards blacks uh, and tell black folks that they needed to get a job and pull themselves up, and all this really crazy, outlandish behavior and approach towards trying to have a normal life in America right after slavery. They were ignorant, homeless, no job. I mean, they didn't have a whole lot of choices after emancipation. And could you imagine some white person like all irritated telling me that I need to get it together and get a job and I'm free now. I should be just get right in there and participate. No. Not That's not realistic. And some of them knew it, I'm sure. Some of them were probably just ignorant, thinking that blacks had the tools uh, to launch an effective campaign in a racist society. You know, so that's the one. That's some issues there. Whites believing that all things are equal and we have access to the same rights, resources, wealth, and things of that nature in America, which is not the truth. And finally, the whites believing, are at least constitutionally, on paper, America is a colorblind society. On paper. And like I said, you're hear this from me a lot. We can legislate all kinds of rules of behavior so that at least we won't be abused or marginalized overtly. We can't put a big screen on everybody's head and find out exactly what's motivating them, what's uh, determining another individual to exclude us or deny us access to a product or service. You know, how many times has it been um, an issue with uh, race, age, you know, economic status, whatever. You know, how many times has that been the truth in America? You know, those are some things to think about. So, you know, on paper, America's colorblind, but in practice, I believe racism is rampant, flying off the handles here in America. We, where it does exist in the heart of someone else, it, it's an area we've not penetrated where we can prove exclusively and assuredly that some of the issues are race related. You know, all we know is that we've just been denied a job or not been included in some activity. You know, we've had no choice but to accept whatever excuse was given. But it's not enough. If we can ever get a surefire way to um, see the heart of man as opposed to versus constitutional law, then you'd see America change in a big way if we could ever get to that space. Equal opportunity for all. That's the second myth. We've got a couple more to go in this series. That's day 52. Thanks for hanging out on Tomlin's Night, back at 365 days towards racial change. We'll see you again.